was only a little town, but Briarcrest was destined to become an important place, for it was the birthplace of our alma mater. The origin of BBI is synonymous with the names of such people as Hildebrands, Whitakers, and also Glens, Hilsons, and Sandersons. The little group of Christians called a pastor to shepherd the flock. They felt Henry Hildebrand, a recent graduate from Winnipeg Bible College, was the answer to their prayers. Surely now they could have a Bible school for the sake of the young people in the district. He was reluctant, but when Odd Brigman said that if Mr. Hildebrand started a school, he would be a student, it seemed the tide turned. The school opened in October 1935. Mr. Hildebrand was principal, choir leader, pastor, teacher, and I suppose housekeeper in his bachelor quarters. He had to be. The room was his office during the daytime. Orville Swenson, the dignified theology teacher we have known these many years, started off as a cook's helper. In 1937, the principal, pastor, was joined by his quiet and shy bride. She is a beautiful lady, and Dr. Hildebrand would be the first to say he would not have been able to withstand the wind, weather, and depression without the steadfastness and encouragement of the lovely lady at his side. As the years advanced, they were joined by 2 girls and 3 boys. As of August 1980, all are married. The school was held in 2 different locations in the little town. In 1937, arrangements were made to purchase the hotel. In return, our people were required to build the town hall. I suppose things were as ready for school as could be expected. The basement was full of water and mud. One wall was somewhat caved in, and burglars had stolen everything that could be moved. But on the plus side, there were 70 enthusiastic students. Then came October 20th. Following a dance in the town, a raging fire swept some buildings perilously near the school. The students vacated the building and helped fight the fire. When it seemed hope was absolutely gone, the wind changed, and the building, somewhat seared, was saved. Now who could deny that God was in control and had plans for the future of this fledgling Bible school? The school was large enough for the 70, and with the addition of 2 more dormitories, there was room for the 125 who came in 1940 and 41. For classes in the main building, partitions were quickly put into position for separate classes. For the first year or 2, it was also turned into a dining hall 3 times a day, until the kitchen and dining room were built in the basement. The radio work was started March 28, 1937. The first venture in broadcasting was from Whitaker's home. Then a group went to Regina each week. One time their vehicle broke down, and they spent the night at a farmhouse. I think I heard it on good authority that Mr. Swenson conducted the snores. During those years when many people were isolated on their farms, particularly during the winter, they enjoyed the radio broadcast, consisting of music, message, and a dialogue. The first participants in the dialogue were Reg and Blanche, later Homer and Jean, and then Helen and Ruth. The small choir who went to Regina later sang in the new studio when it was built in the corner of the hotel where the original box stalls had served as dormitory rooms. While the student body was not so large, the staff and faculty were few in number too. In the summer, they served with the Canadian Sunday School Mission in the camp at Arlington and in daily vacation Bible school. The first conference was held at Whitaker's. Besides the local people, 4 others arrived, the Fenskys and the Wilkies. Later conferences were held at the town hall. People came from farther away. They wanted to be part of this growing school. Then the war hit. There were more girls than fellows in the student body, and for the first time there was a girl as president of the student body. In 1945, the war was over. The boys were coming back. They wanted to return to school to continue their interrupted studies. Love and marriage had caught up to a number of them, and now they needed suites to live in rather than individual rooms. The Cairn Airport was available. Mr. Whitaker looked at the huge entertainment hall, chapel as we know it. He said, "Henry, do you think we will ever fill it for conference?" The chapel was soon filled. Balconies were built and filled. We now have 2 Sunday morning services. As for conferences, take a look at the gym and observe the change the years have made in the parking lot. By the way, don't look for that parking lot. It has made way for progress. The barracks were made into homes and used for dormitories. It was in a part of a dormitory the elementary school had its beginning, with Mrs. Hannah as the first teacher. There are now 4 elementary school classrooms with as many teachers. The forerunner of the high school was actually back at Briarcrest, when several students lived in the dorms and attended the local high school. The high school itself, with teachers and resident students, started when BBI moved to the Cairn Airport. Cairnport, the home of the Briarcrest Bible Institute, and the Cairnport High School, or BBI and CHS as we call them, now houses up-to-date classrooms with the most recent addition of an excellent home economics facility and music room. There are 17 teachers and a grim principal, Mr. Grimilowski, that is. A postgraduate course was offered for a few years for those who wished to take additional courses. Today we also have a store, but at first it was in a corner of the far too large dining hall. All heating in those first days was accomplished by coal. 35 years later, it is hard to imagine what an immense problem this was. The first winter it was hauled with horses. The next year a 1.5-ton truck was bought. Try to imagine the coal shoveled, the ashes carried, and the problems of the night watchman as he walked the campus in total darkness to conserve electricity. The campus flourished, and we cannot help but honor God because He kept it safe. In addition to the heating problems, married students had built their own suites here and there around the campus. All of these were heated with coal and wood. Some remember the long stovepipes in the hangar suites, where the stoves were handled by some very inexperienced young housewives. It was a blessing to have the natural gas installed for many reasons. The opening Sunday on the Caronport campus was July 1st, 1946. Dr. Hildebrand often had reason to recall the words of Percy Fulmore, one of the members of the board. They were chatting following the afternoon service of dedication. Numbers had been few. They rattled around like peas in a pod. Expenses loomed large, and naturally there was apprehension. They had never faced such a large financial need before. Mr. Fulmore said, "Just attend to the main part. Make sure God is here, and finances and other things will be taken care of." The first years at Briarcrest had been hard, but definitely more simple. The board wondered if they were overdoing it when they set the budget at $172. It was one of those first years that total receipts were $60. But people in Saskatchewan gave of their garden produce when they didn't have money to give. It was greatly appreciated. Now at Caronport in 1946 and 47, there was money to be spent every time one turned around, and even if you didn't, the needs skyrocketed. A dairy herd, which held the highest rate of production in consecutive years, was established. A large garden was developed. A bakery produced everything from cakes and pies to Zimmerman and McKay rolls and bread. With the purchase of bakery equipment in 1977, we have an excellent bakery and baker now too. The laundry has been a necessity for obvious reasons and has also been updated. Each of these activities and many others provide an avenue for student work. An infirmary was developed, and it seemed there were always nurses in the student body to help the regular nurse in that area of the work. Just a few years ago, when they were unable to return to Eritrea, Dr. Lorne Penner had a clinic built on campus, and with his family resides on campus. The laying of the water lines from Sandy Creek was a large item, and it is still a large item when a water line breaks in the middle of a cold spell. Students were coming. Enrollment was increasing. Buildings were bulging at the seams. Those responsible knew if they built classrooms, they had to have more dormitories. If we built rooms, we must have kitchen and dining facilities, sports facilities, library, and books to fill it, more staff and faculty, more people at conference, and naturally, more money to keep things going. The service station was built. Then the motel. The former office building later served as a staff dining hall when the new office building and the Bible school classrooms were dedicated in 1964, with the high school 2 years later. The library was added in 1974. Now we have Whitaker Hall with its Isabel and Sinclair wings, Hilson Hall, and Glen Manor was dedicated early in 1980. The very first sports complex was an outdoor skating rink where the elementary school now has its playground. With such a large student body, we need facilities for a variety of sports. We are grateful for the rink with its artificial ice and the gym with its brand new floor. We have produced some real winners. The radio broadcast has continued through the years and is one of the longest continuous programs being aired today. With the Institute at Caronport, we not only have a studio, but bands, orchestra, groups, and choirs unlimited under the direction of Wilf Gertner and his assistants. Through the years, many different quartets and choirs have taken part. The Children's Hour was first conducted by Homer Edwards and later by Ruth and Claire Greiner. It was carried for several years. The most important reason for the Institute is that the Word of God will be planted in the hearts of young people, and through them to the many hungry and hurting hearts in countless places in the world. Students come from near and far. Sometimes several from the same family have studied at BBI. The Rempels and Rodins, however, were outnumbered by the Barons. For 45 years, students have studied at BBI, in their rooms and in the classrooms. Married couples have studied together, from the first couple, Lloyd and Anne Cross, to a whole trailer court full at this time. Students have graduated and some have gone to other lands to serve. The first missionaries were Reg and Kay Glenn, who have recently retired. Reg was honored as the Alumnus of the Year as he returned from service in Africa. One day he, and others like him, will receive a far greater reward when they hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Others have faithfully served in the homelands. Dr. Hildebrand was at the helm for 42 years. We were happy to have the testimonial dinner in their honor at the Center of the Arts in Regina, and then to hear he had received the Order of Canada in 1979. Dr. Henry Budd graduated from CHS and from the Bible department before he took further training and became president in 1977, at which time Dr. Hildebrand was made chancellor of BBI. Time fails us to tell of the many activities each year. You must forgive us for not mentioning everything. There are pastors' conferences, choir concerts, musical and drama presentations, class programs, and 2 large conferences each year. Youthquake is a monumental event, from the wall-to-wall young people to a fly past, to eating beefalo burgers, to say nothing of so many young people listening to the presentation of the Word of God. I spoke to Mr. Hildebrand about some of the highlights that have stood out through the years. He cited several. Besides his wife, who has stood at his side, the board has been comprised of good men, led by Mr. Alvin Memory as chairman for many years. Many of the staff and faculty have faithfully served for over 25 years. He mentioned some of the difficulties that had to be faced, such as the conference mud at Briarcrest where there were no paved streets, the fire at the hotel, the move to the present campus, and the fire in 1958 at Cairnport, where we could have faced extinction as far as the campus was concerned, had God not had his hand on us for good. There have been storms when the train could not get through all the snow to bring the needed coal, but it came in the nick of time. In 1978, it stormed relentlessly for almost 5 days. BBI is many things. True, it had a small beginning. There was a small group of workers, but then, as now, each was doing the particular task the Lord required. There have always been times of fun and fellowship. Remember the gum chewing act? There were banquets and times of study and prayer. From one building housing all departments to an entire campus. From 4 supporters to thousands. Can anyone fail to see the hand of God at work? BBI is a hallowed spot. Some have served and gone on to glory. Buildings may come and go, such as E and F dorms, but the decisions made for Christ and the work accomplished for Him through classes, prayer, conferences, and student ministry can never be taken away. And BBI is you. You are a very important part of the ministry. You are needed to give not only monetary support, but also prayer support. We depend on you. We need your children to attend school. Many second-generation children have attended BBI and CHS. In 1980, we have our first third-generation student in CHS. Michael Peters from Gibsons, BC, is the son of Arliss and Ted Peters, both of whom attended and probably met at BBI. Arliss's father, Oscar Eliasson, a student for 2 years in the Bible department, remained on campus, working until his retirement. Like so many of the retired people, we think he is not retired, but rewired, or at least retreaded. The world needs you and your children to serve in every phase of life, and God needs you to serve in the very place He has for you. Thank you for watching our presentation of Now and Then. This is Rodine speaking for the committee. May God bless each member of the alumni family. Wait. Speaking for the committee. May God bless each member of the alumni family. Wait a moment, we have something interesting for you to hear. Irvin and I have called on Mrs. Whitaker at 51 Lansing in Moose Jaw. She's in a lovely location down here by the river, and it's a beautiful fall day. We have given on the tape an overall picture of the development of BBI, but we would like to zero in on some special things. You were there from the beginning, Mrs. Whitaker. With some others, you suffered the birth pangs. I'm sure you will pardon me if I seem a little forward, but as I remember, Mr. Whitaker was a busy man. If he wanted to get things done, he wanted it done now, or yesterday if possible. But BBI didn't happen like this, and we're going to chat about some things as they happened. Mrs. Whitaker, how do you feel in comparing BBI 1935 with BBI 1980?
Well, I felt that God was in it because He answers prayer. And what He does right. So we give Him the glory.
Going back prior to 1935, why did you feel there should be a Bible school?
Well, I felt that there was ignorance on every side as well as with myself. I studied a Moody Bible course, and that taught me much that I had not known before. So it's necessary for us all to know the Word. That's why I felt we should have a Bible school.
I did some writing when we honored Hildebrands on their 40th. I'll read the first few verses and ask you to comment on that particular time. 'Twas a dark and dismal day in 1935. Little goods and money kept people still alive. A phone call came. I must see you. The men have given up. Yes, Annie, it is true. Given it up? No school this year? Some of the young people got into gear. With Annie and Isabel leading the clan, they were sure Pastor Hildebrand was the man. When he was accosted, he said, I can't teach. The hearts of the young people I'd never reach. They just wouldn't come. His ground he stood, when an earnest Norwegian simply said, I would. Some years before, through turmoil and toil, the Hildebrands came to Canadian soil. Through Bible training at home and away, the school had its grounding in that earlier day. In the village of Briarcrest, where people tilled the sod, a group of faithful ladies studied the Word of God, and souls were saved, just one by one. The work of the Spirit had truly begun. When Sinclair was saved, he got to work. A letter to Winnipeg wouldn't hurt. He followed it up with a second and third. Finally, Hildebrand answered, but still demurred. Come and look us over. 'Twas an earnest plea. He came, he looked, but frankly there wasn't much to see. Some enthusiastic women a few men on the side, and all around, just flat land across the prairie wide.
Well, Ethel, that's very true. It was a pretty sad-looking sight around at that time. But as we went down and contacted Mr. Hildebrand, we gave him a verse, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths." He can direct as we follow him. And that is what has happened. He has directed all the way.
Do you remember the opening day, Mrs. Whitaker? Did you wonder if students would really come?
I can remember when there was only 17 students, but they were ambitious, as we were, to learn the Word, and God undertook.
I imagine the school leaned heavily on you for some necessary things. Perhaps you had to hold Mr. Whitaker pretty securely. I think he would have given the shirt off his back if it was for a worthy cause and he was sold on it.
Yes, Mr. Hildebrand used to say that my husband was the steam and I was the brakes, but both are needed.
The first conference, it was at your place, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, but due to the muddy roads, people couldn't begin to go home that night, so they stayed in our front room on the floor.
Mrs. Hildebrand came about that time. I imagine you ladies were concerned about her coming.
Yes, and she made an ideal minister's wife because she was very calm and very capable.
The first radio broadcast was from your home, too. Did these kind of things have an adverse effect on your family life?
No, it didn't. It meant a lot of extra work getting ready, but not at all on the family life.
About those days, I wrote, "The well-ribbed cattle poked slowly